There's a moment in life that doesn't look like a breakdown. It looks like nothing at all. No tears, no yelling, no visible pain. Just silence. A kind of silence that hums in the background of your chest, where feelings used to live. You wake up and the world looks grey. Not sad, not terrible, just muted. Coffee tastes the same, music doesn't hit the way it used to, and laughter feels like something you're watching through glass. You tell yourself you're fine, because technically you are. You're functioning, you're showing up, you're smiling when you should, but somewhere deep down, you know something's gone missing. That's what emotional numbness feels like. It's not the presence of sadness, it's the absence of everything. Psychologists describe emotional numbness as a defense mechanism, a kind of psychological shutdown that happens when the system is overloaded. It's what the brain does when it's been hurt too many times, felt too deeply, or held too much for too long. It's like when a circuit overheats, the power cuts off, not to punish the system, but to protect it from burning out completely. And yet, the cruel irony is that protection can start to feel like a prison, because once you've disconnected from pain, you've also disconnected from joy. The wall you built to stop the storms also blocks the sunlight. I remember someone once described it perfectly. They said, "It's not that I don't want to feel, it's that I forgot how." And that's the hidden tragedy of emotional numbness. It's not the loss of happiness, it's the loss of aliveness. If you've ever felt that way, like you're existing more than you're living, you're not broken, you're in self-preservation mode. See, the human mind is wired for emotional regulation. It's constantly trying to keep you safe. When emotions become too overwhelming, too intense, too prolonged, your brain quietly steps in and turns down the volume. It's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to help you survive. But that survival mode comes with a cost, because when you stay in it for too long, you start to lose access to the very things that make you human. Empathy, passion, awe, and even love. There's a theory in psychology called emotional blunting, often linked to chronic stress, trauma, or depression. It's not always visible on the outside. Sometimes the people who are the calmest, the most composed, are the ones who've shut down the hardest. They've learned that emotions make them vulnerable, so they built a fortress. And they've lived in that fortress for so long, they've started mistaking it for peace. The truth, numbness is not peace, it's quiet pain. Pain that learned to disguise itself. People who've become emotionally numb often don't even realize it at first. It creeps in gradually. They stop getting excited about the things they used to love. They stop crying when something sad happens. Not because they're strong, but because the emotional faucet has rusted shut. They start to say things like, "I don't care anymore." Not out of apathy, but exhaustion. Underneath that numbness is usually a story of overextension, of heartbreak, of emotional labor gone unnoticed. It's the mother who kept everyone else together for years until she stopped recognizing herself. It's the man who's been strong for too long, holding in everything because he was taught to never fall apart. It's the friend who always listens but never speaks. And it's the child who grew up in chaos and learned that feelings only lead to pain. Eventually the body learns a cruel lesson. If feeling equals danger, then not feeling equals safety, and so it adapts. But here's the thing, adaptation isn't healing, it's survival. And survival isn't the same as living. Most emotionally numb people didn't choose this state. They were forced into it by repetition, by the same disappointments, the same emotional betrayals, the same fatigue that taught them that caring too much hurts too much. So they stopped feeling, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom that's turned heavy. Because what's the point of opening up again if every time you do, something breaks? But here's where psychology meets hope. Neuroscience tells us that the brain isn't static, it's malleable, plastic, flexible, capable of renewal. The same brain that learned to shut down can learn to open up again. Emotional numbness isn't a permanent sentence, it's a temporary pause, a signal that your nervous system needs rest before it can feel again, and that rest often looks like stillness. But it's not the kind that restores you overnight. It's slow, it's gentle, it's uncomfortable, because reawakening emotion after numbness feels like thawing after being frozen. It aches, it tingles, it's both relief and pain at the same time. You start to notice small things again, like the way sunlight hits your desk in the morning, or how a song suddenly stirs something faint but real in your chest. And those moments, as fragile as they are proof that you're coming back to life. But to reach that point, you first have to face an uncomfortable truth. Emotional numbness is not the absence of emotion, it's the suppression of it, and everything suppressed eventually surfaces. When you stop running from your emotions, you start remembering who you were before you became tired, before you became careful, before you started mistaking numbness for strength. Because emotional numbness, at its core, isn't a flaw, it's a scar. It's the mark left by battles fought in silence. If you peel it back gently, without judgment, without rushing yourself, you'll often find deep sensitivity underneath. The kind of person who feels everything but learned to hide it because the world kept saying, "You're too much." In fact, research shows that people who describe themselves as emotionally numb often score higher in empathy once they begin to reconnect. They aren't cold, they're sensitive souls who've gone into hiding. And maybe that's the real paradox here. The most emotionally numb people are often the ones who once felt the most deeply. They were the ones who noticed everything, who remembered every word, every tone, every unspoken change in someone's eyes. They were built to connect, but connection became the source of their pain. So they shut the door, not forever, just until it felt safe to open it again. But time alone doesn't heal numbness, because numbness isn't time-based. It's trust-based. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly feel again. You rebuild safety, moment by moment, until your heart finally believes that it's okay to come out. And that's what most people misunderstand. They think emotionally numb people are heartless, cold, detached. But the truth is they're simply scared. Scared of being flooded, scared of losing control, scared of feeling everything all at once after feeling nothing for so long. The key isn't to force them to feel. It's to give them permission to feel, without judgment, without demand, because numbness melts in the presence of safety. Not pressure, not confrontation, just gentle, consistent safety. If you've been living in that state, please hear this. You're not weak for going numb. You were trying to protect yourself in the only way you knew how. But your story doesn't have to end in emotional silence. Somewhere inside, the part of you that once laughed too hard, cried too easily, and loved too deeply, it's still there. It's waiting for you to knock on its door again, and maybe the first knock isn't grand. Maybe it's just a small whisper. I miss feeling alive. Sometimes people think numbness fades when life finally gets better. When the chaos ends, when the job stabilizes, when the heartbreak heals. But that's not how it works, because numbness doesn't come from the chaos itself. It comes from the aftermath. It's not the storm that silences you. It's the quiet after the storm, when you look around and realize everything's changed, and somehow so have you. In that silence, your body still remembers. Your nervous system still scans for danger, even when there's none left. That's the strange thing about emotional numbness. It's not a lack of emotion. It's a state of constant emotional protection. You're not empty. You're just guarding the last fragments of your energy. Modern psychology calls it emotional avoidance. It's when the mind associates feeling with pain so strongly that it begins to disconnect preemptively. The result? You become calm on the outside but restless on the inside. You laugh at the right moments, you nod at the right times, but it feels more like performance than participation. You begin to act alive rather than feel alive, and at some point that becomes your identity. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just who I am now. But it isn't. It's who you became to survive. The truth is, emotional numbness often hides a story of overwhelm. Years of overstimulation, emotional responsibility, or quiet heartbreak that was never given the space to be processed. For many people, it's rooted in the idea that emotions are dangerous, inconvenient, or even shameful. Maybe they were told, stop crying. Maybe they learned that expressing fear or sadness only made things worse. So the body adapted. It muted what couldn't be understood. There's something deeply human about that, because deep down we all want to avoid pain. We distract ourselves with work, with screens, with endless scrolling. We say we're busy, but what we often mean is, I don't want to feel right now. But feelings don't disappear when ignored. They wait. They gather quietly, layer upon layer, until numbness becomes the only thing left you can feel without breaking. And yet this state, as lifeless as it feels, is not the end. It's a pause between who you were and who you're becoming. The psychology behind recovery from emotional numbness is both fascinating and hopeful. Studies in affective neuroscience suggest that emotions are like signals, energy in motion, designed to guide